Why do the smartest people prefer to be alone, yet still suffer from being ignored? This question reveals a secret that could completely change how you view solitude and yourself. If you've ever felt out of place in groups, misunderstood in conversations, or exhausted after social interactions, get ready. This video will show you why this happens and how to transform this apparent curse into one of the greatest powers of your life. There's a philosophical and psychological reason for this phenomenon, something that goes far beyond what we imagine. The preference for solitude among these people isn't a sign of weakness or social rejection. It's a conscious choice of the mind, seeking to preserve its mental clarity amid the chaos. Arthur Schopenhauer revealed a truth that echoes through the centuries about the nature of superior minds. He observed that people with greater intellectual capacity naturally seek solitude as a way to protect their mental energy, not as an escape from reality, but as a defense against the excessive demands of the outside world. As he said, "The higher the mind, the less pleasure is found in banal company." This statement doesn't reflect arrogance, but a deep understanding of how human consciousness operates. When someone intelligent chooses to be alone, they're practicing a deliberate act of psychological self-defense. For those who think in deeper layers of existence, being surrounded by superficial conversations is exhausting. It's like forcing a virtuoso conductor to conduct the same simple melody over and over again. The soul resents this constant underutilization. The choice of retreat allows these minds to maintain clarity of thought and avoid the cognitive overload caused by prolonged contact with unnecessary stimuli. This preference doesn't mean despising other people, but prioritizing mental health above empty social conventions. Schopenhauer understood that mental quality is more valuable than quantity of interactions, and this wisdom becomes even more relevant in the era of constant notifications and incessant digital noise. There's a pain that only people with sharp perception know: the agony of being ignored when trying to share deep insights. This pain isn't common. It's an existential suffering born from incompatibility between different levels of intellectual development. When someone intelligent talks about topics that really matter and notices blank stares or abrupt subject changes, they feel a subtle rejection that gradually corrodes. But this doesn't mean you have no value. On the contrary, it reveals the opposite. You're operating at a level of depth that most haven't reached yet. It's like trying to explain aerospace engineering to someone who barely understands basic mechanics. It's not your failure, but a perceptual limitation of the other person. The modern world, dominated by social media superficiality and the speed of shallow information, has lost patience for absorbing knowledge that requires deep contemplation. This perception should bring relief, not sadness. When you're ignored, it's often not because your words lack value, but because they carry an intellectual intensity that challenges others' mental comfort zones. Henry David Thoreau expressed this perfectly when describing the feeling of marching to the beat of a different drummer from the rest of society. Understanding this transforms rejection into a sign that you're thinking at a higher level, even if this causes inevitable moments of seclusion. Friedrich Nietzsche also brought a revolutionary vision about the need for withdrawal for the development of superior consciousness. He introduced the concept of the free spirit, a being who has the courage to step away from collective mentality and forge their own path. This isn't teenage rebellion, but intellectual maturity. It's awareness of the dangers of mental conformity. Nietzsche perceived that the most evolved souls need periods of seclusion to create their own values and live according to inner truth, without constant interference from others' opinions. The concept of herd mentality he described remains one of the most accurate observations about human behavior. Most people operate on autopilot, following patterns imposed by society, or today by social media algorithms, without questioning whether these patterns actually favor personal growth. The free spirit has the courage to examine each belief and decide what deserves to be kept. This journey of self-discovery requires moments of deep quietude because it's impossible to hear your own consciousness when you're constantly surrounded by others' voices. Solitude becomes then an act of intellectual power, a declaration of courage, the decision to discover who you really are, instead of passively accepting who others say you should be. Truly intelligent people have a striking characteristic. They simply can't sustain masks for long without suffering profound psychological wear. This vital need to maintain the integrity of their own essence creates a natural distance from groups that live on appearances. It's not arrogance, but rather a matter of preserving authenticity. Living with integrity means being willing to disturb those who prefer superficial and predictable interactions, choosing truth even when it's not comfortable or popular. This courageous choice almost always results in fewer social connections, but those that remain have incomparable value. Someone genuine prefers 2 true friends to 20 Instagram followers who barely know their essence. Nietzsche expressed this poetically. Truth begins when you free yourself from the herd's expectations. This liberation requires a gradual process of self-discovery and courage to disappoint those who expected you to remain within limiting molds. Oscar Wilde masterfully summarized, "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken." Reflective retreat brings a rare gift, the crystal clarity that emerges when we eliminate the noise of banal interactions. Schopenhauer observed that silence and introspection are essential fuel for a creative and productive mind. When someone consciously steps away from excessive stimuli, notifications, messages, attention demands, they create the internal space necessary for deep thoughts to emerge. This process allows reorganizing the mind, clarifying priorities, and making decisions from a center of inner wisdom, not external pressures. It's like meditation practiced by philosophers throughout the centuries. In quietude, great discoveries happen, creative solutions arise, and the person rediscovers their essence. History proves this. Einstein developed the theory of relativity during his solitary walks. Thoreau wrote about simple living while isolated at Walden Pond. And Darwin formulated the theory of evolution after long periods of reflection on his rural property. These cases aren't exceptions, but show a universal law. True creativity flourishes in silence. The message is clear. Being alone isn't emptiness. It's sacred space for the mind to breathe, expand, and create. It's an intellectual luxury that few understand, capable of transforming moments of seclusion into periods of profound productivity. Elevated sensitivity brings a painful peculiarity, the ability to see patterns, contradictions, and injustices that most prefer to ignore for convenience. This refined perception becomes, paradoxically, a source of suffering. It's like having emotional X-ray vision that reveals hidden truths behind perfect facades, creating the constant sensation of living in another world. Sharp intelligence isn't weakness, but a refinement of perception. However, this gift has a price, the inability to live in the comfortable denial that protects less developed minds. When you see through illusions, social media superficiality, media manipulation, corporate falseness, reality transforms into an emotional minefield. Charles Darwin lived this dilemma when developing the theory of evolution. He knew his ideas would shake the religious foundations of the time and therefore delayed publication for years, aware he would be misinterpreted and attacked. This ability to see too much makes withdrawal not just a choice, but a refuge against the mediocrity that dominates many interactions. Understanding that this pain comes from superior sensitivity and not from personal failure is the first step to transforming the weight of solitude into a powerful source of discernment. Nietzsche also recognized the transformative power of reflective seclusion. For him, temporary withdrawal from the crowd isn't escape, but an alchemical process that forges a stronger and more conscious human being. His famous phrase, "Become who you are," can only be lived away from influences that distort our true nature in an inner laboratory where we experiment with ourselves honestly. This transformation isn't passive, but active work of confronting the mind and its limitations. It's in these moments of silence that we discover internal resources we didn't even know existed. Solitude forces us to be our own company and our best counselor. Creative withdrawal allows us to explore hidden aspects of personality, experiment with controversial ideas, and develop unique visions without the suffocating judgment of the outside world. Maya Angelou said, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." The result is the emergence of a truly independent individual, someone who finds strength to live according to their own values, even when this means going against the current. One of the greatest perspective shifts our society needs is understanding that conscious seclusion isn't weakness, but an extraordinary act of personal courage. Being alone requires a resistance that most don't develop. Many prefer unsatisfying relationships, toxic groups, or social media addiction to facing the challenge of being emotionally self-sufficient. Those who feel good in their own company conquer one of the purest forms of freedom, emotional independence. This doesn't mean coldness, but the ability to choose when and how to connect, instead of seeking relationships out of neediness or desperation. When you're self-sufficient, no one can manipulate you with the threat of withdrawing love or approval. This inner strength translates into natural confidence that doesn't depend on external validation. Those who master the art of being alone develop a healthy relationship with themselves, becoming simultaneously their best company and most trusted advisor. Clarice Lispector captured this essence when saying, "Freedom is little. What I desire still has no name." Feeling good in your own presence is a rare privilege, a sign of emotional maturity and character firmness that should be celebrated, not hidden. Genuine creativity and seclusion have always walked hand in hand throughout human history. The great works of philosophy, literature, art, and science were born from contemplative silence, not by chance, but because the creative mind needs space and quietude to access deep layers where truly transformative ideas emerge. Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, for example, spent long periods in relative isolation, and it was precisely in these moments that they gave life to some of their most revolutionary ideas. Creativity can't be forced or fit into rigid schedules. It flourishes when we create the right internal conditions for its manifestation. These conditions include mental silence, absence of external pressures, and time for thoughts to mature. The creative process resembles plant growth. It needs space, nutrients, and patience. The best ideas emerge when we're not trying to force them, but when we step away from the noise of notifications, urgent meetings, and social media anxiety, allowing them to emerge naturally. Stephen King writes his works in an isolated room, always at the same time. Van Gogh painted his greatest canvases during periods of retreat. Nikola Tesla conceived his most visionary inventions in long hours of solitary work. Quietude is the sacred space where the mind wanders, connects unlikely dots, and discovers what remains invisible in the agitation of modern life. Thinking independently inevitably puts someone in conflict with those who prefer to follow ready-made patterns. It's a natural law of evolution. Pioneers always face resistance, incomprehension, and even hostility from those who feel threatened by visions that challenge their beliefs. Truly intelligent people carry the weight of seeing the world with different eyes, and this distances them, temporarily or permanently, from the majority. Nietzsche observed with precision, "Whoever walks ahead of their time must endure incomprehension." This estrangement isn't accidental, but a consequence of operating at a higher mental frequency. Questioning truths held as absolute, proposing innovative solutions, or seeing realities that others prefer to ignore is enough to generate discomfort and rejection. This price of thinking differently takes many forms. Being called arrogant when there's actually just clarity, being seen as antisocial when seeking quality, not quantity, in relationships, or being labeled pessimistic for seeing truths others refuse to face. Galileo was persecuted for saying Earth revolved around the sun. Van Gogh sold only one painting in his lifetime. Nikola Tesla died poor and forgotten, despite his revolutionary inventions. These reactions don't reveal flaws in these minds, but rather people's difficulty in understanding perspectives that transcend their comfort zone. The discomfort your ideas provoke is proof that you're fulfilling a role of transformation and evolution. The solution to the dilemma between seclusion and human connection isn't seeking understanding from everyone, but building few relationships of the highest quality. This requires a strategy change. Instead of wasting energy seeking approval and likes, focus on deep connections with people capable of appreciating your complexity. One or two people who truly understand your value are infinitely more important than dozens of superficial contacts. Genuine relationships require patience and discernment. Quality people are rare and often also prefer few bonds to large social networks. This selectivity isn't elitism, but practical wisdom about how to invest your emotional energy. Finding compatible people requires authenticity from the beginning, even if this drives some people away. It's better to be rejected for who you really are than accepted for a distorted version of yourself. Integrity functions as a natural filter that repels empty connections and attracts those who value depth and sincerity. Practical strategies include seeking communities based on genuine interests, prioritizing conversations that really matter, and having patience for solid relationships to develop naturally. As Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are just waiting to see us beautiful and brave." Inner freedom is the pinnacle of personal development, the ability to think, feel, and act according to your own values, regardless of social pressures or others' expectations. This freedom isn't granted by anyone, but conquered through a deep process of self-discovery and character strengthening. Nietzsche captured this essence when stating, "The truly free man creates his own values. True liberation comes from defining, for yourself, what is important and valuable." This autonomy can only be built through regular periods of solitary reflection. It's impossible to discover your authentic values when you're constantly bombarded by opinions and judgments. Whether in superficial conversations, social media feeds, or corporate environments, retreat creates the necessary space to question inherited beliefs, examine personal motivations, and consciously decide what kind of person you want to be, instead of passively accepting imposed identities. Those who conquer this inner freedom don't need others' approval to feel valuable, don't let themselves be manipulated by emotional blackmail, and don't compromise their principles to avoid temporary conflicts. This independence generates a sense of personal power that nothing external can destroy. It's the difference between being the protagonist of your own life or merely a supporting character in others' drama. Real freedom reveals itself in courageous choices, opting for truth even when it's inconvenient, establishing healthy boundaries even if this disappoints someone, and following your own intuition, even when it goes against well-intentioned advice. The inevitable question is, isn't it better to be free than accepted by everyone? For those who have experienced this freedom, the answer is always yes. However, it's essential to differentiate healthy solitude from destructive isolation. Constructive quietude is chosen consciously, with purpose, whether to reflect, create, or recharge energies, and is balanced with quality human interactions. Toxic isolation, on the other hand, is born from fear, anxiety, or depression, creating a cycle of withdrawal that compromises well-being. Maintaining a healthy balance means using solitude as a growth tool without transforming it into an emotional prison. This involves maintaining some true connections, even if few, and being open to shared experiences that truly add value. Knowing when to retreat to recharge and when to open up to the world is an art of wisdom. Some signs indicate when withdrawal becomes harmful: total loss of interest in human interactions, persistent sense of emptiness, difficulty functioning socially, or using seclusion as escape from problems that need to be faced. Healthy solitude energizes and brings clarity. Sick isolation drains and confuses. The key is developing emotional flexibility, being able to intensely enjoy your own company without losing the ability to connect with others. As Carl Jung said, loneliness doesn't mean being alone, but being at peace with your own thoughts. The goal isn't to eliminate the desire for human connection, but to elevate the quality of these connections, maintaining serenity even in their absence. If you recognize yourself in these descriptions, understand, there's nothing wrong with your preference for solitude or difficulty fitting into conventional groups. On the contrary, this reflects sensitivity and sharp perception, qualities that should be celebrated, not muffled to meet limited expectations. Your value doesn't depend on external recognition, but on the integrity with which you live your inner truth, and the courage to choose depth instead of superficiality. Reflective solitude can become one of your greatest strengths when embraced as a choice of freedom and authenticity. Use these moments to nurture your creativity, deepen your self-knowledge, and strengthen the resilience necessary to live according to your values, even if this disappoints those who would prefer to see you predictable and domesticated. Remember, the brightest minds in history found in solitude, not a curse, but a sacred laboratory for ideas that changed the world. You're part of an ancestral lineage of independent thinkers, those who chose truth above convenience, integrity above popular approval, and inner freedom above the security of the herd. As Thoreau said in one of his most powerful reflections, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, but you've chosen a different path, the path of those who prefer to live a true and solitary life over a comfortable but false and conforming existence. And it's in this courageous choice that lies all the difference between merely enduring life and truly living it.